Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. Today we are answering an email from Roxanne. That's what our notes say. So
Yep.
thank you, Roxanne, for emailing us.
So Roxanne was saying how they have conflicting information on literary agents and want to know if it's possible to have multiple agents because different agents have different clients. Is it advisable? What's your take on this? We have thoughts.
I do have thoughts. Yeah. Well, okay. So first, I think we should start by saying it's possible. There
Anything's
are
possible.
several different reasons or arrangements in which you might have multiple literary agents, right? So I co-agent at BookEnds. I have two clients that have another agent at BookEnds. But there are some instances where you might have an agent who reps your kidlit and an agent who reps your adult. So it can happen, and I think it's an individual conversation to have with who's representing you first, but I don't like it.
I don't advise it.
Yeah.
Especially now the situation you're in where the authors have two different agents. It's you and another agent at BookEnds.
Yes.
Which I think is different than having two agents at two different agencies, which I think is trickier.
Right. So one of the clients that I co-agent writes picture books, and I co-agent with another picture book agent, and I've been working with the agent and that author since I was first taking on clients. The agent represents the client's adult. I represent the client's middle grade. So there's clear delineation and expertise. But because we work at the same agency, we have access to the same contracts, the same resources. We are in almost constant contact, and we know what the other person is doing, and we can strategize and brainstorm together. I'm not saying you can't do that with an agent outside of your agency, but I think there are some complications there, especially if it's different genres or age groups.
The biggest, I guess there are some issues that could arise if you're working. Well, let's talk first about why you might want multiple agents and why we see this question come from authors. I feel a lot of times authors, when they're querying, have written two different types of books and understandably feel passionate about both books and want to find agents for both books. But it's hard to find an agent who does, let's say, middle grade and adult, or in this case, like middle grade or picture book or something like that. Or sometimes it's even hard to find an agent who might do adult romance and adult thrillers. So an author will naturally assume, well, I'll just get two different agents. I think at the querying stage, you want to query your best book and go out with that and see sort of where your career starts to go before making your decision. But let's go into some of the red flags of why you wouldn't necessarily want two agents. And I'm going to start at the very basic, the submission stage. If I'm submitting your work and you have another agent submitting another work, just because you have two agents and two different types of work doesn't mean you're not going to be ending up at the same publisher. And it would be awkward and truthfully, most likely frowned upon if the author has two different projects with two different editors at the same house. It's weird, and I think it creates a conflict within that house. And so unless the agent and the two different agents are coordinating, which is tricky to do with submissions, there could be problems. Or both agents submit both projects to the same editor.
I also think submission, maybe more negotiations are about power. And I think if you have something else going on with the same publishing house that's out there, I think it's very easy for an agent to lose their negotiation power if there's suddenly another book in the mix or something else that's being considered, or part of the author's career that I'm not in the know about being considered and factored in. I think I lose some of that power and some of that know and like holding the information. Like I think that gets watered down. And I'm not saying that it can't happen with good communication, but I think often there's bound to be things that you're not updated on or you don't know yet when you are splitting the work of an author.
I also think it looks complicated to a publisher, and things are complicated enough. I don't think a publisher wants to go, oh, this author has two different agents and all of this different stuff, and That's confusing. What point do I call what agent? At what point do I call the other agent? I think it can complicate things on all ends. But then the negotiation process is difficult too, right? Because a lot of what we're negotiating helps in a contract, from the beginning stages to the contract itself, are about protecting and furthering the author's career. And I have to know what your other contract says to know, first of all, if I can even submit your book. What sort of negotiations has that other agent made that might put limits on what I can do?
Also, deal term precedents too. What have you gotten paid? What are your
Yes.
royalties? What are your subsidiary rights?
Right.
What are all of the things that I should know if we work together? I would know. I would have access to. How can I make it better? How can I keep pushing? Or scheduling too. So Jessica talked about non-competes, but also, okay, you have
Scheduling is huge.
yeah, you have a book coming out in spring of 24. We might not want to throw a book in summer of 24, right? Like, and then do you have something in spring of 25? We don't know. So all of those things, they require constant and transparent communication.
Yeah. And to be honest, as an agent, I don't want to call an agent at another agency and say, okay, I'm going out in submission with this author's work. What do I need to know from your end? I'm negotiating the contract. I need to know it yet. That puts a whole level of complication into mine, and also puts my negotiations at jeopardy, but also I don't want to make a mistake that puts your contract at jeopardy or puts you in breach of contract for one, both, or the other contract, which
Right.
is so easily happen if there are too many cooks in the kitchen, let's say.
Yeah, and so again, I think it could be done. I don't love it, but I also think it's really cart before the horse too. So I think if you're going into querying thinking you have to have multiple agents, you're doing a lot of like thinking when you don't have to,
Yeah.
because you might meet an agent, right? And so one of the instances that I'm working with at BookEnds, that agent, I mean, that author queried the other agent, signed with the other agent, and then later on in their career, that's very established, decided they wanted to write something younger. And we were able to find a solution in-house. So you didn't have to go there. And I think, like you said, Jessica, starting with the book that you feel is the strongest, that you really want to debut in, start there. And then you could probably figure something out beyond that. Your agent that you sign with for the adult might say, oh, actually, I can do middle grade, I just don't open to it, which is my instance, right? So I can do middle grade, I'm just not open to the queries. So you have to, I feel like you got to get your foot in the door before you start entering two different doors. And it's not gonna, you don't know how it's gonna work out until you've had those conversations.
Yeah. And a lot of times when I've been in situations where a client says, I want to go in this direction, typically it's they want to go in this direction, but they don't want to burn any bridges, right? They want the safety of, I'm going to keep you, but then I'm going to go find another agent for this so that I'm never agentless.
Right.
But the truth is, if you're switching directions outside of my expertise, probably the best thing to do is to terminate the contract and you go off in that direction. But also, it's not always advisable from a building your career standpoint to be stretching yourself too thin. So, you need to build a career. So this client that you've talked about, James, who's rating adult and middle grade, you made a very good point that she was established, very well established before she decided to launch into middle grade. If she was writing one adult and then one middle grade and then one adult and one middle grade, back and forth and trying to sell in that way, it's really hard to build an established audience, because no matter who you are, your audience does not necessarily hop around in age groups or genres. You can't guarantee that as a very successful romance writer, even that your audience is going to carry over to your thriller or your middle grade. It doesn't always happen. So it's also a marketing branding strategy.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point.
And if you're working with two different agents in your branding strategy and marketing, that can become super complicated if I don't know what the other person is doing and we're all sending stuff to the same whatever. It's going to look sloppy. Yeah.
So there are two things to consider if you are, maybe you're already agented and you're trying to find another rep. First, I think maybe three things. you have to have the conversation with your current agent before you decide I'm going to go off and query.
Yeah.
Don't do that. It's bad practice to query while you have an agent without letting them know. But also, if you want to know how your contract is written and what is covered under this agency agreement, you just have to have the conversation. You might have to do an amendment for the agreement. And the second thing is, like, nothing should be done on like the down low, right? Everything should be above table, explained, communicated, transparent. Every party should know everything. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't query and say that you're looking for rep without saying you have rep for adult if you're querying a middle grade. Everything should be
Yes.
above table.
Because
That is
phone calls do happen sometimes because agents become confused.
right.
Oh, this author queried me and said that you represent them, but is that true? Because I don't want to move forward on this if you're not okay with it.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's good practice, like good business practice, but I also think it's kind of saving you a headache, future you a headache anyway. Just be above table if you are going to do it, but definitely consider everything that we've said, because I think it does make for a trickier working situation. I'm not saying it's impossible. I don't think it's impossible. I know that there are some folks that do it and do it successfully, and more power to them. But I also think you are going to see some agents who feel the same way we do and might not want to engage if there's another agent on the table. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would just think one last thing overall is ask yourself why. What's your real business plan? What's your real goal as a writer? How do you want to build your career? Do you just want to throw everything out there and try to get published in every way possible? Or do you really want to strongly build a career and brand? And we often use the restaurant business for an example, right? Like restaurants tend to have sort of a style and a brand, and you can't just do whatever you not want willy-nilly because your audience expects something from you, and you want to make sure that you are giving them that so that you can be the big name you're looking to be.
Yeah. Look, a food analogy. It's been a while since we've had
I
one.
know, I really had to pull that one in because
I think we just both ate lunch.
I just had lunch.
Right. Okay, well, we hope this was helpful. Roxanne, we hope this answers your question. Thank you for emailing it in. If you have any follow-up questions, leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe. We post new videos every Wednesday, so we'll see you back here next week.
Bye.